Hello, everyone. Let me introduce myself. I'm Elena Georgiou. Welcome to the Global News and another episode of Trauma Recovery Series. Today, it's the 8th episode, and the topic is Unmasking the Link Between Parental Stress and Child Development. So in our previous episode, we talk about emotional distress, and feel free to go back and watch our Trauma Recovery Series episode. So I'm here with David Giltz from the I Am Project and Nicole from Parenting Solutions. And I'm here to remind you to live life to its fullest and never look back. That's my second book, and it's on Amazon. And feel free to visit my webpage. So my first book is in Greek, but I may translate it if I ever find the time when I am over publishing my third book that I'm working on, and I'm here to end the generational trauma and confusion and help you find clarity. So I want to welcome David and Nicole before we begin this discussion. Hello, David.
Hi, Elena. Really good to be
doing?
here. I'm looking forward to today's conversation.
Very interesting discussion today. Hello, Nicole.
Hi, how are you?
I'm fine. I'm here with my great-great-grandpa's trauma. Great-grandpa.
I can see them all gathered around you.
Yeah, and the trauma. And I am the trauma, I think. That the last one is the fifth generation. And today I'm going to talk about great-great-grandpa until my generation. So I'm the fifth generation here. And let's begin then. So as I already said, I'm working nonstop to finish my third book based on my life story, lessons learned, which are connected to generational trauma. And I started writing it after my dad died in 2021 because I wanted to heal everything I have been through. And writing helps me heal. And becoming an author, storyteller, expert, researcher, trainer, and speaker helped me end the confusion and to gain clarity in my life. Because it helps me, I continue doing more of that. And I dedicate my third book to my ancestors to honor them for all the sufferings they have been through by sharing what happened. So on July 3rd, 2021, my dad passed away. So this year, Sunday, July 2nd, I will honor my dad and all my ancestors, and that means my great-great-grandparents that lived in this village where I'm living today, by attending church on my father's Memorial Day. And on that day, all their names will be mentioned to honor them in church. And I wrote a piece of paper with all their names. And this is the first time I'm doing this. So I don't usually go to church, and it's a big step for me because I'm more spiritual and not very religious. Although I will attend alone because unfortunately my family will be in another church due to this generational trauma. And yes, it hurts. And I know I have to move forward with courage. And I will do this to honor all my ancestors and let go of the hurt I inherited from all the unworked legacies, the stories that were never resolved. And today's topic concerns unmasking all the stresses parents face that hurt children's lives, and parents face all sorts of tensions, maybe financial, unhappy, unstable, loveless marriages, single parents, divorce, multiple partners, brainwashed children from one parent against another, and the drama they were affected as children, and so on. So I want to explain more about transgenerational trauma, which refers to the subconscious transmission of traumatic experience. And some people in the next generations can find themselves with various trauma symptoms without having experienced the trauma themselves. And the term collective trauma is used where trauma affects many people within a group. So maybe your parents were traumatized as children too, and their unresolved trauma was passed down from parent to child, from unconscious mind to unconscious mind. And children are vulnerable, so you picked it up, and as a result, you were affected too. And many of children or grandchildren suffer from depression, anxiety, shame, insecurity, feeling lost in the world, or repressed anger. And ancestral traumas are the unworked legacy of those who have died. And this might include unresolved life stories, secrets, resentments, or injuries that never healed. So I was a granddaughter and a great granddaughter that suffered from all this trauma transmission. I was neglected, abused, thrown out of my home without money or inheritance. And I have two adult children who don't want to see me anymore because they were brainwashed against me, and one facing mental health issues. So there is a reason why. And my great granddad had three children just like me. He had neglected to take one of his sons, an 18-year-old son, to the hospital, and he died. At that age, 18, I was looking for an exit door, facing forced marriage and abortion, and abandoning my dream of continuing my studies at a university. It took me 20 years to finally study at a university. And also this great grandpa threw out of his house the other son, my granddad, and left him without money and inheritance to start over. And I had also experienced the same. So my great granddad did all this, and this pain transmuted into my life. But if we go back, we can also find the same pattern again from other generations before my granddad. They too have experienced a similar situation. My mom couldn't face the pain of this situation, and this was the unresolved legacy she had inherited, the suffering, and she has the media. And my ancestors couldn't resolve this because somebody had to face it and fix it. And a few years ago, my mom told me that as a child, she visited her grandparents without telling her parents and her uncle, and the one son of that family got all the inheritance. And that son that got all the inheritance did the same to his son. He gave one of his sons inheritance and left the other one without. So the pain of the collective trauma wanders until someone is strong enough to feel it. So I was that person. And I sat with that pain and felt it. And to end the confusion and bring clarity into my life. And to handle all this pain of generational trauma, I'm still trying to close this curse by taking responsibility, going to court, claiming my share of the inheritance I was excluded from, something my granddad never dared to do. So they all died and never finished this painful story, which runs in future generations until I was fully awakened to do something. So I must fight against all odds to win my share of my dad's inheritance in court according to the law, though in the past justice was never served in my cases, and lawyers provided me with sweet nothings. So I'm willing to show up and fight for what is mine to close this generational curse within this family, so that their worked legacies will not continue to the next generation. So I was chosen to bring to light the unresolved legacies, and that's why I'm here today telling you about it. And I live in my ancestors' village where this started, which nobody told me about before. But the truth set me free when I found out. So history repeats itself until we can heal any wound passed out from generation to generation. And we only need to acknowledge it, what it is, accept, forgive, and move on. And moving on means letting go of all the hurt, rewriting a new story so our grandchildren will not be affected anymore. And although I don't have grandchildren, I don't want my future grandchildren involved in this story. So I took full responsibility for resolving this as a mature human being. And as a granddaughter, I know how this generational pain feels and how it transmuted in my life because I have awakened to the truth. And I also know how to replace it because I did by healing myself, having a big heart to forgive, unconditional love for my ancestors that suffer the same shit I suffered. My two children that are refusing to talk to me, stuck in darkness and chained with their dad, My eldest son that is stuck in confusion and struggling to break free due to depression and anxiety and trying to find the meaning of life, and life doesn't have purpose for him. And my one and only sister that doesn't speak to me, my mother that has dementia, and me standing firm and grounded. This is the way to heal from generational trauma and stop it from hurting our children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren. And do we have time to heal all this? The time is now. Healing starts with you, and we all have a role to play in healing ourselves and ending this confusion. And another way to heal is through daily spiritual practices, praying, healing, meditation, journaling, letter writing, and many others. And there are lots of practices. I use this and they work for me. And also acceptance of what it is. And we can go back and change what happened. It's over. It's done. And we have a choice to move forward. And also start working on the rejection you might feel from the people around you. And these people are indicators of what you need to work on. And if you can't handle the situation, you should seek help. And it's okay not to be okay. I know that it's painful. I sometimes seek help myself, although I know how to get out of it. And I do help others. But sometimes I need someone to take care of me when I'm not in the position to do that for me. And so this is all I wanted to share with you today. And I hope it helps. And I'm here to help. And let's go back now to David and Nicole to share their stories of unmasking this truth. David, do you want to start sharing your perspective?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, you bring up so many really great points along the way, and it's so there was something that came to me years ago, and I thought, I thought about I don't know if you've ever watched, if you watch boxing, and of course each fight may last 30 seconds or 60 seconds or 3-minute rounds, right? So you can only fight for so long. But they're not fighting, if the fight lasts for an hour, they're not fighting for 60 minutes nonstop. There's breaks in between. And so this crazy idea came to my mind, and I thought, and this kind of leads into gratitude. Yes, suffering and tragedy strikes everybody's lives on one level or another. But I thought to myself, I mean, I grew up in a very aggressive environment. My father was a very, very large and angry human being, for his own reasons, right? For his own boxes that were never unpacked. And but I thought about when we one of his favorite tools was a leather belt, and he likes to like to make us dance. And I thought about, like, the anticipation of waiting for him to get home was just horrific, right? You're dreading, you had hours and hours of dread before his truck holes in the driveway. But I think about the 45 seconds or 90 seconds, in that moment where you're in terror as a little kid, in your experience with your parent who's unleashing their anger on you. But I thought about it, said, it's so interesting, that if at the time of my birth, and let's be a little bit playful with the possibility, at the time of my birth, if I was given an angel with a stopwatch, and that kind of a strange thing to have an angel do, but and so the angel said, I'm going to time how long were you immersed in tragedy, and how often were you not? Right? Not how long did you remember it, now how long, how many times did you recall it, but how long was the actual circumstances, right? So I got into a fight in my first black eye, I think I had in grade 8, right? And that took all about, about 90 seconds, 2 minutes for the whole fight to start and stop and be done with. But I labored over that black eye because it, of course, took 3 weeks for it to disappear. And the thought of it, of course, rang on in my head for years. But the moment, the actual tragedy only took place within a very short period of time. And so my question was, what was happening when tragedy wasn't happening? And it kind of speaks to the idea that, humans are hardwired to pay attention to negative experiences at a much greater level than positive ones. And so, with a focus on, unpacking tragedy and trauma, yes, that's really powerful work. But I think another part of the work is the exact opposite, is the daily reconciliation, the daily awareness of what is so beautiful about your life, and remembering that. And as our recognition of gratitude grows, those boxes, even though they still exist, I think the boxes can be smaller in kind, that their power and their impact is not as great. Because before we got on I air here, Nicole mentioned something about the idea that if we just keep bringing the trauma forward, keep bringing it forward, that's all we become fixated on, because that's the only conversation. And we can embed it more. We can embed the conversation more deeply, and it can affect the way we see our entire worldview, even if that problem is 20 years in our past or further back. But if we keep repeating, and that is the only story of our life, it's the only thing we're focused on, then the tragedy and trauma of that event will take on a really much more an exaggerated control over our life. And I find that, yes, dealing with these things, dealing with our past, certainly needs to be attended to. And you use words, Elena, like courage, right? It takes courage to step into that, right? It takes a huge amount of vulnerability. Maybe more, I being a man, that I find that's way harder. It took much longer to be able to navigate that, because I didn't want to speak it. Because if I said it, it would have meant that it was true. And it was way safer to keep it in my head than just be an angry male, right? Right. Go work hard, go hit a punching bag, be angry and dismissive of people, right? Just take my box and, and put a bunch of straps around so this thing can never get open. And it's the most interesting couple of poignant times in my life. I witnessed being with my son. I think I shared this in a previous conversation, giving him a bath. And I was irritated. I had my practice, and I had a discussion with one of my employees, and I was just so frustrated and so irritated. And probably more than I needed to be with this individual. So I probably exaggerated my experience with him, and something probably piggybacked that. So it made my frustration with him was exaggerated. But I'm with my son, he's having a bath, and my son starts splashing water up along the wall, which is what a little kid would do in the bath. That's what you expect them to do. That's why they're having a bath. It's fun, it's playful. And I could feel the energy of my irritation from earlier on that day unload itself. And I yelled at my son, like stop it, and I scared my poor kid. My son was just terrified. But I could watch it happen, like watching an accident happen in slow motion. I could see this energy, like a bolt of lightning, come to my brain, and me bark at my son and scare him. And I realized, and it was kind of horrific observation. It was very, very shaming for me. I felt ashamed that I was allowing that to happen, but I was also very grateful that I could see it. And when I realized that I had to start working on all the violence, the alcoholism, I lived on the street for a couple of years. That's it's a predatory environment, lots of violence, lots of just insanity, and trying to make sense of all that. But if that was the only thing that I was involved in, the only thing I was thinking, if I was constantly fighting these stories and trying to invest all my time reconciling these stories, I forget that my life is also beautiful and is full of all sorts of amazing things, and it's wonderful. And I've got, in fact, most of my life, I would say 80% of my life, even in the darkest of times, was still wonderful. But our attention, especially when we have high levels of cortisol, when we're in this fight or flight mode, even our peripheral vision, like if you're stressed out, reading a book is very difficult because your peripheral vision disappears, right? Like you can't see out here when your stress level's high, because what's the whole idea of fight or flight? This thing in front of me, this thing in front of me. So you become fixated visually, right? You become fixated emotionally. Your attention is drawn to the thing or anything that looks like or feels like that thing. And you become fixated for long periods of time. So you can't concentrate. You got tunnel vision for so many things. So I was so fascinated by the physiology of stress and trauma, right? So many things are going on. And when I couldn't unpack the message, when the stories were, let's say, beyond me, I just wasn't ready to address that. I started paying attention to how my bodies were responding. And those were the cues that I began to work with. The level of irritation, the frustration I was having. So yeah, I wasn't ready to open the box, wasn't ready to have that conversation with anyone, let alone myself. But I could actually start paying attention to the emotional cues. And that started giving me, moment by moment control in my life. And Elena, you also spoken about spiritual practices. And my belief, and I think we had talked about this before, that I really truly believe, not just from a spiritual level, but from a mental health and a physical level, like what's good for the whole body, is our ancestors lived in environments that were incredibly challenging. We talk about, our world's insane currently, right? So just the insanity is a bit challenging, but they had day-to-day, our ancestors had day-to-day challenges of just staying alive, right? Women had challenges. Women were much more vulnerable in our history than they are today, right? More sexually vulnerable, more risk of so many things because just the nature of culture as it was, and yet people survived, and yet people seem to find courage and fortitude. But one of the things that I kind of asserted, or it's a bit of a hypothesis, is that because we had daily spiritual practices, because we prayed daily, because we had this overarching idea that there was a point to suffering, there's a point to life. We had to come together as a community. We needed each other. We needed our partnerships, right? We needed our spouse. We needed to be on the same page. We needed to work at that. We needed our community. And because today we have these artificials that are so what's the word, lacking in the cultural normality of our history, right? Because our culture is so disbanded. We just don't have those tight-knit groups anymore, that we actually have to seek them out. We have to make those communities inside of our own world, right? We have to go seek it out, because it may not be, like Elena, you're saying, your family may not be on board for it, but we can't do it on our own. It's really quite hard to do it on your own. So to be able to seek out and start building your own communities, right? To find people who believe what you believe, and that may be in a church, it may be in secular activities, maybe it's in your fitness center. You find people who believe the way you believe, interested in the same things, but you really do have to have the courage and vulnerability, and to realize that this work is almost impossible to do on your own. And that we are designed to be, we're communal creatures. We're designed to do things together. And if we have a good degree of self-awareness, a bit of humility, that was my stumbling block, right? A bit of humility along the way, realizing that I can't do this on my own, and that it is natural. In fact, we're designed to support each other. And when you have the vulnerability and the humility to do that, vulnerability and humility gives tremendous amount of courage. And when you start opening those boxes and you learn how to do that, in partnership with beautiful, supportive people, it's amazing how your life starts to turn, and how many more beautiful things, and how much more courageous you become. Because you don't have to, there might be 1,000 things in those boxes. Chances are, after you start working on a few of them, your brain will start doing a lot of that work all on its own. And just you showing up, being a grateful, humble, courageous human being, will do the work in the background of your mind, just as a natural side effect of your courage to live out loud as you do, Elena, each and every day.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's so fascinating, right? But we're made to do hard things.
Exactly.
We're designed for it.
And we owe it to ourselves to take responsibility and change the course of history. Even if, let's say, we collected the trauma, we have to turn it around and change our stories, right?
Absolutely.
Nicole, you want to share something?
Sure. Yes. I have to just first say that I totally agree with you that it's time to start creating new stories for ourselves with happy endings, that we're the author and we can write our own stories. So, exactly. Well, thank you for that. Yes. All right. So I know, and from personal experience, that when I was a young mom and the children were very, very small, and I had picked up a lot of things without even knowing that I had picked them up from my upbringing. And, when I would complain as a teenager and get together with my friends, and my mom is just this, and this happened, and that happened, and everything else. And, you would have a good complaint and everything. And then as a young mom, and I started seeing things with the children and they were upset in that, then my immediate thought was, well, I had it tough as well as a child, but I turned out okay. And that's what I would like us to look at tonight, and just to see just how okay did we turn out. Because our brains have a habit of hiding the truth from us. I think it wants us to, the subconscious mind, whose job, and it does such a great job of protecting us, doesn't want to see us to see that actually maybe we're not so okay. So I would just like to take a moment and see perhaps how the stress and the anxiety of our everyday living that has probably come because of the way we are turning up and we are facing the different situations in our lives. And it's those choices that we're making today that are so, so important, because that is what happens. Your mind gets some information, absorbs it from when you were a child. Maybe nothing was said directly to you. Maybe it was just observations. And our brain is very, very clever, and it forms neural pathways. And then once the neural pathways are formed, we just run on automatic. So it's like learning to write. If you can remember way back then, and you picked up your pen, and then you had to learn how to hold the pen and how much pressure you were going to put on the paper to be able to write what you had to write, and how all the letters were formed, and you had to think of each individual letters, and then they had capitals and small lowercase letters, and you had to physically learn all of these. And each time you picked up a pen to write, you were teaching your brain how to write. And at some point, the brain said, wow, I've got this now. I've learned this. And it put it on automatic. And today, when you pick up a pen, you are not thinking how much pressure you're going to use. You are not thinking how you're going to hold it, and how's the capital A and how's the lowercase a formed. You just write. You think about what you want to write, and you just pour it out. So our brains have observed everything, things that were said to us, things that were said to others in our family, at school, at church, and the play park, and movies and everything, and it formed neural pathways. And today it just takes over. So when your child does something, you just react. You're not even thinking before what my reaction is. You just react immediately based on what the brain learned. And you don't even remember learning that. And you're not even thinking about, is this reaction appropriate to what has happened? It's just all on automatic. So what I would like just to do is just to take a moment, and then we can look at some signs that maybe you are feeling, some symptoms, we can call them symptoms, if we are stressed. And we can start to realize that our brain is running on automatic, and that process that has happened is actually affecting us in all our areas of our life. Because what is happening once the brain has done its programming and it's got the information and it is running on automatic, it's like a computer with a Windows system running in the background, and then it's able to run all different sorts of programs. Okay, but my Skype is not going to work properly if my Windows is not working properly. And, the Excel is not going to work properly, and Word is not going to work properly. And so if your automatic system is not running in a way that is healthy and beneficial for you, then it's affecting all the other different programs that you're running in your life. All right, so some symptoms and signs could be physical symptoms, such as you could be getting headaches, finding that you're getting a lot of headaches or muscle tensions, stomach aches, maybe you're tired, having difficulty sleeping. You might have different mood swings, like maybe you find yourself getting really irritable quickly, that you don't have your normal temperament, that things are triggering you, and you're reacting, your go-to reaction is getting more and more with being anger rather than any other emotion. Or maybe you're getting sad or even depressed is a sign that things are not going right. Maybe you're having problems concentrating, you're experiencing memory lapses, or having difficulty to make decisions. So by observing us, taking a step back and just seeing what is going on for us, get your journal out, write all this down, and just to see how well you are actually. And then what we can do is we can put in some systems in place. So I know for me, like I would incline to be triggered by the children, and I would shout. And especially if they weren't listening to me, that would really drive me crazy. And what I had to do is that you can help yourself, put sticky notes up, but you've got to reverse the programming. You've got to undo these neural pathways and to form new ones so that the newer, healthier ones are become the automatic running system. And then you're not having to think about them. You're just automatically reacting from that space. That's going to be calm and comforting and empowering to your children. So, another thing I would do is that I would tell the children, I would get family meetings going where they were open to telling me what was bothering them, and I could bring up things like, something, it's really driving me crazy that you're not listening to me. I don't have a lot of patience when you don't listen to me, and so let's see some things that you can do to help me. And so I would tell them that, we have a rule in the house, and it's a no shouting rule. So that if I shout, that rule applies to me too. And so you have to say to me, Mom, there's no shouting. And the first time my son did this to me, I was like in the middle of a lovely rant about something or other. And he said, Mom, remember, no shouting rule. And and it took me a while to stop myself and say, yes, he's right. There is a no shouting rule in this house. And so that helped me a lot, was to actually get the children to stop me. And afterwards, he would sometimes come and tell me if we were in another meeting about something else, and he would say, yeah, Mom, but you told me I had to tell you there's a no shouting rule. Well, one time you said to me that, I'm not allowed to backtalk you. So that was really difficult for me. And I don't know if I can tell you that there's a no shouting rule if that's going to be your response. And that made me so aware of what actually was happening in that moment. And that he said to me that, and then the next time I was shouting, and he said, Mom, no shouting rule. I stopped myself from saying, oh, well, I'm the mom, I'm allowed to shout. Well, if only you just listened, then I wouldn't have to shout, or any of those responses that we sometimes come up with, because, we are the adult. And, being the adult sometimes isn't very beneficial. And we need to be the child and listen to those children, because they're sometimes so much wiser than what we are. And so I think, and there's also techniques like tapping that we can use. And we can say, even though I have a tendency to shout, I will still love and accept myself. And then just go through all the tapping points and bringing yourself back into a place of calm, and to be able to help you reprogram what's going on for you. So just a quick recap. Be aware, have a look at what's working in your life, what's not working, and maybe a lot of what's not working is coming from stress and bad programming that you learned as a child, and then taking the steps to put the reprogramming in place and taking care of your own emotional well-being and your children's while you're doing that.
That's really correct, Nicole. And it's taking care of ourselves so we can take care of our children. Because if we're not feeling well, then nothing is going to be okay around us. And yeah.
Yeah, well, and I like the fact that it's something that you've said this in numerous conversations about, You set the time aside. You come together as a community in your family. You decide collectively. It's not like you said, I'm the parent. I mean, that's how I grew up. Like, it's just, children had no voice, right?
Well, the golden rule, right? Children should be seen and not heard.
But it goes back to, again, Elena, what we were speaking about before, but the idea of these practices, there's an intentionality around it. And really in life, I mean, when I'm writing a new business plan for something I'm creating here this fall, and it's actually quite a process, because I have to understand what's the objective, what goals am I trying to reach, what's the overarching philosophy. And for our life, our spiritual culture traditions used to have a certain way of guiding us through life, right? The responsibilities spiritually and let's say earthly, right? Our roles as parents and as partners and to ourselves, to the community. Like, it was pretty intricate, right? The more I look through these cultural practices, there's a lot of detail. Now, some of them may not make sense for our current worldview, but there was so much structure to it. And now it's kind of like, go buy a book, watch this video. It's like, it's just kind of fly by the seat of your pants. And life, these relationships are too important, right? There's too much at stake for us not to take it seriously, not to set the time aside, and to really get excited by the fact that we can unpack those boxes. We can give our children a much different world than the one that we grew up in, a much different experience of it. And it's not about making them weak and passive and everybody's nice. It's making them strong and aware. Like I used to tell my son, listen, part of our job is to make you spiritual, but I want to make you street smart as well. I need you to be aware that the world is not always kind, and prepare you for that, not defensively, but courageously, right? To be a beautiful spiritual being. But yeah, it is that, like Nicole, as you said many times, you have to take the time aside. You have to be honest. You have to be willing to take it from your kids. I've got it a few times, and it's a bit confronting when your kid tells you, kind of, points at you and goes, yeah, you're being inauthentic. I think my son once caught me trying to bribe him because I was harsh. He was trying to bribe me, and he knew it, and he called me on it like instantly, right? It was a very awkward moment for me as a parent, but these are great opportunities to learn as an adult. That all we want to do is love our kids and make sure they have this great entrance into life and they become these beautiful human beings. And we can't do that if we're not willing to have enough humility to realize that we're certainly not perfect, and there's work that we really have to do.
Exactly. And it's not like we're healing and creating a new world for our children. We are working also for our great grandchildren. I mean, the next generations, because I want, let's say, my box of great grandpa not to write trauma. I want great grandma Elena's success stories, or kindness, or courage. I want that box to write that kind of thing for my great grandchildren that will come. So it's kind of, we're working for the other generations now.
Yeah, and we need to empower our children, and we need to give them a voice, and we need to know them to know that their voice is heard, that their thoughts are important, their opinions are important, and that they are a part of the family. And the most thing I really want to give them, and when we talk about our family, is that we're a team, that there is no one higher than the other one, and that everybody's, I'm going to mess up as a parent, and they can come and they can tell me, I didn't like your choice there. We always talk about never ever have good people and bad people. They've been taught from very, very young that people make a choice, and the choice is good or the choice is bad. And people are not their choices. So when they mess up, I can say, oh, I did not like your choice right now. I've never said, oh, I don't like you right now. Right. And, I can say, I don't like your choice. And, this is the consequence of this choice. And you can make a different choice next time. and I can tell, they can tell me, Mom, I don't like your choices right now. And I go, right, let's talk about it. And sometimes, you know, we have put consequences in place, and then when the consequences have to happen, they get angry with me. And I go, you know, I'm always open. If what we've put in place is not working, and that what made you not do it or do it, you know, I am open to adjusting and changing. So maybe you're a little bit older than you were when we first put in this scenario in the life. You know, for an example, you know, you can have watch 2 hours of TV a day, and I would come home and I realize that they've been 3 or 4 hours, which means, okay, that they don't get the TV time tomorrow, and then they get angry and upset with me. But that is something that they already knew. So I said, you know, rather come to me and say, Mom, can we look at the 2-hour program? You know, like it's holidays, can we perhaps have a few more hours, and we can find a way that works for both of us? You know, I can say it's really important to me as your mom that I don't want you 6 or 7 hours on the TV, because it is damaging, and it is my job to protect you. But if you feel that you need 2 more hours because it's holiday, then we can talk about putting breaks in between, and sure, let's do that. And so then in that kind of way, you find solutions together, that it's not me making their choices for them, it's them making their choices. And sometimes if their TV time is taken away the next day, you know, then I give them a way out. I don't want them to think that that's it, that life is that cruel. So, you know, they can come to me and they say, Mom, I really, you know, my favorite shows on, I really want some TV time. What can I do to win it back? And I said, well, what will really help me is if you do it some extra chores. Okay, Mom, what chores can I do? And I get them involved that way. And so that nothing's always that fine out. And if they don't want to do a chore, then they don't get the extra TV time, and that's their choice as well. So to me, it's very important that we give children a voice, and that we are there to listen to them.
And you're promoting communication, to hear them out, to discuss, to find together solutions. And that's how happy families and healthy families are. Okay.
Great.
All right. Do you want to share anything else, or we should close out this discussion?
I'd just like to say is that, you know, once you realize that you do need to change some things, that, you know, you have that voice in your head, which sounds like you've got your mother living in your head with you. Just be gentle with yourself and just take it step by step. I know when I was, you know, transforming from this "they don't listen, I shout" reaction that was so deeply programmed in me, it's that it took me, it came about in stages. It didn't come from the one day to another day. So, you know, my son would say, oh, don't shout. All right. And then, but the next time there was a situation, I could suddenly in mid shout realize, oh my God, I'm shouting again, you know, and then stop by myself. I didn't need him to tell me that. And then the next time it would happen, it was, oh my God, I think I'm about to shout right now. And you become more aware of what your reactions are, more aware of what you're doing in the moment, because I think so many times we just react without even realizing what we're doing. And then afterwards we feel so guilty. So just be gentle with yourself. And if you did stop in mid shout, you go, way to go, you know. I stopped in mid shout today. Give yourself a high five and encourage yourself as well.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So thank you. Thank you to our viewers, and see you next week.